Hello there. Thanks for joining me on another edition of Real Money Stories. I'm your host, Jason Butler. And today I'm joined by Ken Okoroafor. Is that correct, Ken? Did I say that right?
Yes.
Good. Sorry about
His
that.
surname's pronounced.
Yeah, I'll call you Ken.
Yeah.
So look, thank you very much for taking time out to be on the show. I've watched some of your videos. I think you've got a very interesting backstory, which is why I wanted to get you on. And, you know, this show is all about breaking the taboo of talking about money. We don't all know the answers, but it's about sharing our journey and sharing our insights, pros and cons, ups and downs, good and bad. And that's why I wanted to get you on. So look, before we get into your backstory, can you just tell everyone what you currently do, or, you know, how people can hear about you and what work you do?
Yeah. Okay, sure. So I run with my wife the Humble Penny and something else called Financial Joy Academies. That's what we do full time right now. But up until April this year, I worked in finance as a chief financial officer in the venture capital business in London. It had always been my dream to really take a leap one day and focus on doing something totally different. And for me, running the Humble Penny as a company, as a business, has always been a dream in a way, since I kind of started and thought, what if this thing could actually generate some income down the line? And then kind of work towards making that a reality. So that's what we do right now in terms of how people can reach me. It's at thehumblepenny.com. That's the kind of main place, or The Humble Penny on YouTube. You can also check out at The Humble Penny on Instagram. It's another place as well.
And yeah, Ken's got some great videos, so check him out. And he's you know, he's got a great face for video, much better than most of us in personal finance. So look, thanks, Ken. Let's go back to the beginning, because I'm really fascinated to find out about what your early money experience is and the things that you learned about money as you were growing up.
Interesting. Wow. How far back do you want to go?
What's your earliest memory of money?
Earliest memory was that money really didn't exist. So I was born in Lagos in Nigeria, and I moved to the UK when I was 14 years old. So first generation immigrant to this country, and earliest memories were that essentially my parents spent most of their time traveling to try to make a living. And it was usually that we lived with mum at home, and although mum was working as well, and that dad was out somewhere trying to find that daily bread or whatever. And so, but it wasn't really, I didn't think of the word money was not the thing that came into the picture. It was more the reality of what the lack of money meant. That was what we were experiencing, because, you know, it pretty much dictated where we lived, which was in rural part of southeastern Nigeria. And then gradually, my parents started to push themselves out and be more daring and seek out better jobs. You know, only then did we start to, you know, potentially then start to rent a property that I could share a room with my brother and my sisters, could maybe share a room together. Before that, it was very rural, and we lived quite nomadically. You know, we traveled a lot, and then, you know, settled on one place where I then lived in. And over time, then, you know, at the age of 14, my parents then sought out to come to the UK to seek kind of better opportunities.
Before we come to the UK, I'm just interested in how you said that you didn't have much money. Was that the case for all of your peers, your chums at school, your people around you, or and what impact did that have on you? Did it make you feel, I don't know, that money was scarce or something that was to be revered, or you were not bothered?
It was no. It was very different. So when I started secondary school, it became very clear that there were differences in household income and wealth and what have you. Because some of the kids would come to school with kind of like the type of food that I could only ever imagine was in a restaurant. You know, things like you take for granted now. I'm just to tell you, it's really funny, right? But you see like a Scotch egg, yeah? You go to Sainsbury's and you like disregard it. It's just like, oh yeah, that's just a Scotch egg on the shelf. But when I was growing up, that was stuff that only the really wealthy people could even like get access to. let alone like even for me to even envision taking a bite into a Scotch egg. Like, do you see my point? And I'd see people drinking like a Pepsi, because in like that part of the world, like very, very hot part of the world, hot drinks and like Coca-Cola and stuff was like, if you could afford that, then, you know, you're on at a very different level. But then a lot of my classmates, their parents they had enough money to buy a Pepsi and a Scotch egg during lunchtime. Whereas I'd be thinking, like, why can't I get that Pepsi? Why can't I have that Scotch egg? And so for me, when I moved to the UK, and we're going to get to that in a minute, but the one thing I really wanted to get my hand on was a Scotch egg, because it was one of those things I grew up thinking, like, why is it that some people can buy those things and I couldn't? Everything, even compared to like the type of shoes kids were wearing and how white their shirts were, you know, like we're wearing white shirts and, you know, mine would be on auto repeat. Whereas some of the other kids had like, they'd have maybe 3 pairs for the week. And so they could swap pattern, their shirts remain white. Whereas, you know, mine was either on repeat or it was one that I nicked from the line for somebody else. Another kids maybe hung their clothes up and I've like hung wash mine. I'd go out there and maybe pick one up. It was a culture of the school that you could actually like do stuff like that. It was okay because it was a boys only school. So it was very clear at that stage that I was definitely born into a kind of, how should I put it? Our family were just getting by, you know, and there was no concept of toys. You know, like in this country, kids get toys, right? I didn't have any toys. There's no such thing as, oh, I want a toy. It just didn't exist because like everyone you knew didn't have a toy. And so there was no reason for you to want a toy. Whereas you'd see all the other kids who were slightly better off had these Game Boys, you know, like these Nintendo games. And you just knew straight away that okay, these people were a completely different planet almost, because if their parents can buy them a Game Boy, then it kind of means like, you know, they're far better off financially than I could ever be, you know, as it were. So that's kind of the backdrop, kind of where my perceptions for money were. And I always wondered, like, what's it take for those people to be where they are today? Like, how is it that their parents have played the game so differently that their children are starting to, they almost have this generational wealth. Their children are starting to reap the benefits of, you know, their parents doing money differently somehow, or making more money some other way. You know, how is it that they've been able to do that? But I didn't have those answers, and those answers would start to begin revealed to me many, many, many years later. You know, as we then move to a totally different world in this country and begin to start to figure out what's the game. Do you kind of work? How do you survive, and then how do you then thrive eventually?
Yeah. So as a young teenager, you were aware of the differences between those who had and didn't have. You were questioning kind of why do different people have different things, and you were starting to develop a kind of yearning for things you didn't have, right? So interesting. So you were having these questions in your head. Um, so tell us about when I mean, moving from Lagos or the small village you're in Nigeria to the UK must have been I mean, amazing. I mean, quite a big trauma as well, really. I mean, what impact did that have on? What was the difference then when you saw wealth and money and lifestyle and stuff like that?
Wow. Well, it was a huge shock culturally because, well, for the first time I'd seen a white man or a white woman, like, you know,
Oh, right.
like proximity wise, you know, because otherwise it was like you either saw things on TV or you saw or you heard about things. People who lived in posh parts of Lagos, for example, might have the odd expat who maybe lived there, and you might see their children. And you think, oh, look, there's a white person, and you're kind of pointing at them in the distance. But this time, you know, I'm in a place where I'm like, oh, like most people are white now, and I'm now it's switched around. So over there, I'm like, most people are black,
Mm.
but here now, most people are white. So it's that first culture shock. Then there's the shock of the spoken language, because here, though you might not think of it, most people speak very, very quickly. Like everything happens very, very quickly. But in that part of the world, things are a bit slower in terms of spoken word. So I had to almost start to think, well, how do I adjust to all of that? Then there's, see everything else that comes with it, weather, and the key thing then is housing. Like, people rent or have social housing or their own. But we had a big problem when we came to the UK, in that we had an issue with visas and things, and that meant that we could not go and say, I want to apply for a council flat, and obviously we could not afford to own a home. The question then was, well, if you can't get a job like everybody else does, if you can't get a council flat, how do you then hustle to find the money to be able to rent like the smallest possible place you could find? And for us,
and at this stage, Ken, I'm just concerned. While this is all going on, I mean, obviously having somewhere to live and shelter and that's quite basic. What impact did that have on you? That kind of, how can I put it, the frisson of problems of trying to find housing?
wow. I tell you what it brought was a form of shame in a way, because you feel like you're almost unseen. To explain, like you're beneath like the bottom of the country. Like you've got middle class people, they've got people who are just maybe trying to get by. But they have rights. They've got rights to go to a job centre, they've got rights to go to the NHS and stuff. Like we didn't have those specific rights, because we were waiting to hear back from the powers that be, sorting the legalities. And so you then feel like you're below, and that being below on top of every other stigma, being black, being an immigrant, being, all these other things, and not having money, there was that shame. And that shame, I discovered that later on in life when I reflected on how I really felt. Because I didn't have friends, like, because when you're new to a country, you don't have people who you can just go to and say, hey, like, be my friend, because you have nothing in common with them. Like, you can't speak how they speak. You don't live next to each other. You don't have money to buy sweets and things that kids buy. There's just no commonality. So you don't have friends. So there was loneliness, and there was also shame, because you're in a foreign, strange place, but you still have this perception that place you're in is better than where you've come from, and you can't leave, because the minute if you leave and go back, there's no kind of coming back. So it was almost like, I hate to use the word, but that's how it felt in a way, almost like being imprisoned. Like you're kind of in a place, you can't leave because you're waiting for a decision. You can't go back because you can't come back. So you've got to stay there and make the thing work.
Yeah, a bit like the Brexit transition period. Yeah. So okay, so that must have been a tremendously traumatic time for you as a family, but you also as a young teenager, because it's difficult enough being a teenager, right?
Yes. Oh, huge. A huge change for my parents. Taking jobs that they didn't really want to take because it's the only thing you can get. Cleaning jobs, anything that meant that you were getting some form of cash in hand, or anything that meant you getting some money, you wanted to do it because it's the way you put food on the table.
And did you do little jobs to help out? Did you go and earn some money as a teenager?
Yeah, I did cleaning jobs. I used to clean a factory in Walthamstow. I worked as a sandwich maker. I did all kinds of basically anything that meant that at the end of the week I got my 80, £80 or £50 or whatever it was that I got. I was willing to do it on top of doing schooling and doing the bits in between.
So did you all muck in as a family, kind of took money for the pot, or was that your money for you?
No, that was money that came to the family. So that was money. When I was 16, I eventually got a kind of a summer job that gave me a bit more almost independence, as it were, because I was able to keep some of that money for myself. And then, I'd buy my parents, I'll never forget buying my parents contributing towards buying a sofa in the house. And I've just never forgotten that, because for me, I felt like I've done something that's really worthwhile. We're going to own a sofa that no one sat on before.
And what did you learn from that experience, the sharing, putting the money in and getting that sofa? What did that mean? What did that
what that meant? it it opened up, and this has been a big theme in our family, this idea of coming together as a family and solving our problems together. Even today, like if somebody had a problem in the family, everybody would come together again. If one person was struggling and having an issue, everybody would come together again. So the thing I've learned from that is the importance of family, and especially when things are not going so well, the need for people to rally together and for everybody to kind of come up together. That's just
There's an
one thing.
important point there, Ken, that when someone's struggling with money, or they're feeling on the back foot, or feeling, as you say, shame, guilt, embarrassment, really important to find a way of not feeling alone. And you aren't alone, because there's lots of people who struggle. We're not wired right, are we? But that you had that, although you didn't have a lot, you did have a lot in a way, in a sense you had that shared endeavor. You're all in it together as a family. So then what happened after that? How did things progress with school? I mean, did you get A levels or O
Yes,
levels?
I went through, I did my year, I came in at year 11, did my GCSEs.
Right.
Then, which is the worst possible time to join a school, is year 11. Because you know no one, and no one cares. Did really well in maths and sciences, went on to do my A levels, maths, chemistry, and biology. Did really well at maths and chemistry, got an A in my A level maths. My teacher said, hey, why don't you go and maybe learn
Respect there. An A in A level maths, good man.
Yeah. So why don't you go learn accounting, or maybe finance, or one of these subjects that means that like, you might start to make some good money in life. So the teacher said economics is a good one to look into. I had been thinking I'd go through medicine. That's what those subjects were meant for, really, maths, chemistry, and biology. But I didn't really want to. Finance sounded exciting. So I went through clearing a process just for applying to university, and got into City, University of London, through clearing to study economics initially. Got to university, complete and utter shock. I knew nothing about economics. Teacher said to me, you're almost going to fail. You're really literally going to fail. So I took a year off and came back to do a joint degree in economics and accountancy. That was really the beginning, because I had a game plan. For me, that degree meant so much. I'll tell you why it meant so much, because I had nothing to my name outside of my driver's license that I just passed the year before.
And you had nothing to lose, right? You had nothing to lose and everything to gain.
That was it. It was everything. And so for me, it was 3 years of just pure graft. And I said to myself, if I can achieve a first-class degree, then that would really mean that somebody might take me seriously, and I might even get a job.
So what extent, Ken, do you think that being a first-generation immigrant with really nothing to show for yourself, you were in a strange place, to what extent do you think that you grafted harder to prove yourself than perhaps people, and I don't want to get into the whole race thing, but this whole indigenous population of people, may even be third-generation immigrants, but where they get a bit more of a victim mentality and, oh, well, it's not, I'm just unlucky. To what extent do you think that it was, there was no real going back, because there was nothing to go back to, was there? To what extent did that really galvanize you?
So I think I realized over time that I built up a lot of resilience being born in a different country.
Right.
And that resilience was necessary for me to almost find my way through the many challenges that existed. For me, the only way was up. Like there's no, like, it can't get worse than this. So the only way is for me to keep pushing, try and work 3 times as hard as anyone that I could come across. I used to wake up at 4:30 in the morning, every single morning, turn on Classic FM and study. 3 years solid, because I wanted to demonstrate, even to myself, that I was capable in this new world in the UK, that I was capable of attaining something really desirable, a really good degree, in my opinion, at that time. And so for me, there was definitely the reality of the life we're living, which is like life was hard. But then there was also the desire that life could be a lot better.
And the hope, right?
Yeah, the hope, yeah, absolutely. That life could be a lot better. Question then was, what do I need to do for this life to be better? Like, what do I need to do? What hours do I need to put in? What do I need to study? What type of work do I need to get? This was the beginning, really. And that, for me, that point of studying a degree was almost a point of change in my life, because I felt for once I'd given an opportunity, and for me, this is it. Go with this opportunity and see where it leads me. And that's kind of where it began.
So I'm interested to know, how did you come out of uni financially? Were you a complete train wreck? Had you used every possible route of finance you could get your hands on, or did you come out kind of intact because you were doing cleaning jobs throughout the night and didn't sleep? I don't know.
I did not take a single student loan. First of all, because I couldn't.
Right.
Because I just didn't.
I
I
see.
wasn't
You
one
didn't
of those
qualify.
people on the list where they could go, yeah, Ken, you can take a student loan. No, it wasn't for someone.
So it wasn't an option. Wasn't an option at all. No.
So it meant that I then had part-time jobs, because back then the tuition fee was £1,100 per year, which was a lot of money for me, a lot of money. And even it was so much that together with my parents, we kept pushing the uni to pay quarterly, because we just couldn't afford the £1,100 per year, like upfront. It was like, how do we get them to agree to pay this thing quarterly? And so it meant getting part-time jobs every single year of my 3 years.
Unbelievable. So you came out without any real baggage financially then? Or did you have an overdraft or loans, or no?
I couldn't afford to live in the halls of residence. I couldn't rent an apartment in London. So I commuted from Zone 4 London every day into Angel Station, where my uni was, and walk in and, days over, head back or head to where I had.
So you got used to living on a very frugal lifestyle. You didn't borrow or have any access to finance. So you came out with no real student debt, finance, whatever you want to call it. And you got used to living on rice and beans, right?
That's it. Just got used to that for 3 years. Just carried on. Because
great training.
There was nothing else. Like there was nothing else,
But did you realize at the time that this was setting you up for being not just the qualification, but the way of living that you can get by on a very little amount of money?
No, I hadn't realized that, because I hadn't read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is a separate discussion. But that book opened my mind up to a different mindset, that there could be almost a pathway, a framework for me to potentially follow one day to almost create a different life. All I knew was that my present reality is, do you know what? I have to just get by with anything I've got and go to uni and pretend to my friends that everything's fine, because that's what you do. You say hi to people, bump into them at the library or the student union place. You have to act like they do, because you have to try and fit in. And for me, it was all about trying to not be found out, almost not be found out that I'm struggling, and from here, I'm going to go off and go and do some work, and then I'm going to go focus and do my reading.
But you clearly knew that you were building the foundations for the new you, right? Okay, this was your human capital you're investing in.
Absolutely.
So when you left uni, then what happened? Did you go straight into the job market? Did you go and go back to Lagos, or?
Finished uni, got that first class degree, super proud. Then started to research jobs, and accountancy seemed like a really good path. But then I didn't know anyone who looked like me who was an accountant. So I thought, well, actually, I'm just going to keep applying. And through the application process of getting what they call a training contract, I got into a firm, which then got acquired by a top 10 firm in the UK.
Oh.
So I then suddenly became this person who was training to become an accountant for a top 10 firm in the UK. And again, the same approach as I had at university, focused for 3 years, passed all those chartered accountancy exams, all first time, and even finished it early. So I had then become this person who all of a sudden gone from having barely nothing to my name to becoming a newly qualified accountant with a top 10 firm in the UK. Huge change, because I now
What's not to like? What's not to like about that?
I had a proper salary.
Yeah.
I think I
from zero to hero. Yeah.
26K or 27K or something. I'm like, wow, I've got a pay slip. Because before it was like you get the cash in the hand.
And how did you feel, Ken, at this stage? You've gone literally from nothing. You've grafted for nearly 6-7 years plus the schooling. How did you then feel when you were on that kind of late 20s salary, top 10 firm? You were starting to presumably. Come.
For me, life had begun. Like I felt like I was now on some almost equality with like everybody else. I didn't need to be shameful or anymore, because I felt I had some identity. I could say, hey, look, I'm an accountant, or like, look, I've been able to achieve certain things on my journey so far.
And by the time you become that chartered accountant and you were sort of, you were going for those 3 years, what was your financial situation like? Were you still living on rice and beans and keeping it simple?
Yeah. So it's interesting that actually, because I qualified and managed to save some money up to buy my first property, 2008 in the summer, in June. Bought a place in Zone 4 London, put down, I think it was about £6,000 deposit. Property was about £154,000, right? Bought my first place and moved out. Not too far from my parents, but kind of like, not too far, so I could still have access to some food.
Yeah.
But because I'd started living by myself, I started to develop certain habits. Like I found that I needed to suddenly like do my flat up. I needed to like go to IKEA and buy like a TV unit. And so all of a sudden, with money coming in, I started to notice that the foundation I'd built on a level of frugality, I'd started to almost veer off that a little bit, because I found myself in a place where I started to have money coming in. I go, well, actually, I could afford that.
So you were succumbing to what we call lifestyle creep. As the
Correct.
wages go up, we start telling ourselves because we're worth it. And the temptations become attainable, right?
So it's like, okay, I could afford that, and
Yeah.
my friendships started to change. I had friends who were wearing more expensive jewelry and stuff like that. So, he's got this Rolex watch and, I could kind of get one secondhand, and I started to become that person.
Ken, can I just ask one thing? Because I have, I said to you before we started, I've got some Nigerian friends, and there is certainly in Nigeria, there is part of the culture where, how can I use it? Ostentatious consumption is revered and seen as a sign as wealth. And we know that what that means is you've just taken money and spent it, or you've borrowed money that you haven't got and spent it. So, to what extent was that cultural thing, or where you lived thing, or I'm just really interested in that. To what extent that influenced it?
Because in my culture, the Nigerian culture, you are classed as successful depending on, for example, what title you've got, what car you drive, and what kind of house you live in, like how big your house is and stuff like that.
So the obvious status symbols as opposed to being financially free.
Oh, absolutely. So time, like being able to have it be in control of your time, it's not really the thing that everyone looks at. Or kind of like outwardly, like you showed up to an event.
Well, they can't measure that, can they? People externally can't, inner peace.
That kind of stuff. So for me, there was definitely that level, because that stage of my life, I was also trying to seek out a life partner. I didn't have a wife or anything here. So, the social pressure was, for you to seek out the right partner, you have to be seen to be successful. And being seen to be successful was, at that time, I bought myself a really nice car, and because I wanted to be seen to be, kind of like things are starting to improve for me.
And you're making that point, Ken, isn't that's the key point. I think this is a fantastic example of it. Everyone in their 20s, and to some extent as you get older anyway, but particularly in 20s, when you're looking for social connection, when you're looking to be accepted by people, when you're looking for a partner, you're getting the messages that society is saying is the idea of a successful person, as opposed to learning your own, the inner peace and the inner success, right?
Absolutely. And the thing is a big reason why that was happening was because I wasn't really confident in who I was. I didn't understand who I was really, like what power I possessed. And I didn't understand the power of my own voice, the need for me to hear my own voice and say, well, actually, this is what I think about stuff. And I'm going to choose to go down this specific pathway because of X, Y, and Z. I like a much bigger individual reason for why I was doing what I was doing. I didn't have that almost self-awareness.
You were still learning who you were, right? And what mattered to you and your priorities. So, okay, so you had the nice car, you bought your first house, which is a good move because otherwise you've got to rent one. So then what happened?
Yeah, and then I just carried on, relationship upon relationship. Bad breakups, because like you meet people who you've met for the wrong reasons. Like,
well, you're attracting the wrong people, right?
Yeah, you're attracting the wrong. You send the wrong signals out. You get the wrong people. And fast forward to autumn 2009. After a terrible breakup, I then take off read the Metro newspaper. I think it was the Metro or the London paper, one of those. There's an advert in there to come and learn about property investing. To head out and go to a call it seminar, an event in London, to go and learn about property investing. And when this is on the back of reading that book, The Rich Dad Poor Dad, I thought, well, yeah, this would be a good thing to do. I've got no dates or anything like that. I'm just going to go and learn. But it was at that event that the next stage of my life adventure really began, because I met my wife at that property event.
Oh, now it's ticking the same boxes, right? You're thinking you're on a similar mindset, right? She's at the property investing event and you are.
Yep. So I've met somebody who, number one, hasn't met me because I was driving a nice car, but we met at an educational environment, and we just became friends. And I found out over time of just getting to know her that, number one, she had some savings, and I didn't.
Oh.
Number two, she still lives at home. She's been building up her money, but she still lives at her parents as a hack for saving more money. I'm thinking, that's quite good,
But you're a fast learner, right? You're a fast learner.
Exactly. And I thought, actually, number three, she's attractive and she's intelligent. And number four, she has this desire for a different life. She's born in Hackney, in London, to not much, again, to immigrant parents, and has this desire for just really doing life radically different to her parents, just kind of choosing to do life in a different way. And I thought, this really aligns with kind of what I'm thinking about, having read this book. And this is kind of how we started off as a couple, as friends, from an event.
But you make a good point there, Ken, and this is really important for people out there, is that we, when it comes to managing money well and having the life that you want and money in proportion, you need to be on the same page with your life partner. And if you're not pulling in the same direction. That's when conflict happens. That's when misalignment of spending happens. So, okay, so you were friends, you were doing the property thing. Okay, then what happened?
Yeah, and then we said, okay, well, I said to myself, do you know what? If this friendship thing carries on and goes well for 1 year exactly, I'm going to propose. That would be it.
Good. Right. Game plan.
1 year. And that year was one of the best years of my life, literally, because so many good things started to happen. I just felt like, life, I just felt like, I don't know, like something new, like a new
chapter.
Something had opened up for me, And a year later, in December 2010, on her birthday, on the 27th exactly, I proposed. And 8 months later, in August, 27th of August, we got married, 2011. And that was it. This is where my life then began.
Really?
Properly, like a completely different version of my life. Because now I'm no longer thinking as a selfish individual. I now have to, think of my wife and think about, how we are making decisions.
You're a team now, right?
Yeah, we're a team now. What are our dreams? Like, what vision do we have? What would we love life to kind of look like in 10 years? So Mary and I, almost kind of naively, but this is meant so much to us later on. So we had this idea of a 10-year plan. We said, in 10 years, imagine what would we want life to look like? And this is where we started to paint a picture. We wanted a door that we could walk to. And you could, if you come off the street, you could go to the door and you could put your key in and open the door. So you didn't have to climb some stairs to get to it. You could just get to the door and open the door. And that was was on our kind of vision board, as it were. We wanted to have children, wanted to, really grow in our careers. But at the same time, we wanted more of our time back and, family life and stuff like that. We none of this had existed, but we were kind of thinking, if we could have it in a particular way in 10 years, what would that look like?
So you were envisaging what did good in terms of your life and what mattered to you. And that's the bit, isn't it? So you weren't worried about how you were going to get there and exactly what the date was, but you started to sort of say what you did want and what you didn't want. So then what happened then? Because you were still doing the accountancy, were you? You were still working?
Yeah. Carried on my career as a first year being a qualified accountant. Yeah. Carried on pursuing my career, and Mary also carried on pursuing her career in IT in London, and that carried on. And then the year after we got married, she'd become pregnant, and we were like, oh wow, okay, so We need to kind of
time to grow up, right? Yeah.
and I figure out what to do, the game plan.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, actually, we'd save. She had some savings, because she had her savings, but I'd already had my place. And so we started living where I had already. And then we thought, actually, with children, we probably need somewhere else. So we then, worked hard, started building up savings to buy a family home, which is this house I'm in right now.
So at that stage, Ken, had you kind of avoided overdrafts, credit cards, and loans and car loans and all that, or did you have a bit of that baggage?
So I still had some of my car. Actually, 20. Yeah, I still had. I think I just about paid off my car because
Right.
I bought the car part cash and part financing. I didn't have a credit card, and I didn't have a student loan. All I had was the car loan,
right.
The financing every month. And so the goal was to get rid of that. And at that point, I realized, oh my God, this car is worth almost nothing now. So I had it for so long, and it's just like, okay, it's kind of worn off now. And we're now talking about the idea of buying a family car and moving on to something that you could put, a car seat in and stuff like that. And we then, came together and decided to buy a home, an actual house. But what our vision was, we didn't have any children at this stage, bear in mind. So we're buying a house, in fact, by faith. You were like, okay, hopefully, the child will come and that sort of stuff. And we went ahead and were able to buy that home. And the year after that, 2013, my career carried on. Mary, at this point, was starting to now, come off the city life, because she's pregnant. 2013, our first son came in March. And this is where another challenge came in, because I became the sole kind of breadwinner, as it were, because, going through maternity and all of that kind of stuff.
Big drop in income,
Yeah. So huge drop there. And at the same time...
But Ken, you didn't have a big mortgage at this time, did you? And you didn't have any debt. So did that help?
Oh, no, but we did, because we'd bought a new house.
Oh, of course you had, right. So you had. Did you keep the old flat then that you were living in?
Yeah, we kept the old flat. We'd bought this house that we live in.
So you're really stretched then?
Oh, yeah. Oh, big time. But at the same time, I was also making leaps in my job, in my career and stuff. I'd moved jobs. I was earning a bit more. 2012, 13. Yeah, I was earning quite a good income, not a six-figure income or anything.
And had you kept your lifestyle costs under control? Were you still living frugally?
Because I'd met my wife, who already had like inbuilt frugality. She had a lot to say when it came to kind of managing our family finances. So it was now a case of almost getting rid of the things that I'd acquired when I was living the single life. So getting rid of the expensive watch and the expensive bracelet and finding a way of getting
stuff that you didn't need.
Getting rid of the expensive. Getting rid of cards, and now start to think about family life and stuff like that. So that influence that came in from my wife just gave me a different way of thinking as well, because we started to move the focus away from like acquiring things, but more such thing, well, what do we actually need, at the base level to kind of, be able to welcome a child into our home, into our family, into our life, and so on. So that was quite a pivotal time, because as soon as the child came into the picture and our son Joshua was born, again, the game changed, because like when you have a child come into your life, it's just like a complete shock, because you never raised a child before. There are huge costs that come with that. But we were very fortunate in that Mary's brothers, they'd had children. So we had lots of hand-me-downs given to us. My sister had children, she had boys. So we had lots of things given to us as well. And in addition to that, we had quite, generous friends who were able to, you have these gift lists that people write when they're having children, and people are able to kind of say donate, but kind of buy things for them when they do their baby showers and so on. So we were actually okay to start off with, but that was the beginning of a much more responsible life, because it then became very clear to me that I can't really carry on working, 10 hours, 12-hour days, and with the huge pressure on her, to do everything else whilst I'm doing all of that stuff. Like somehow we have to do something slightly different. And we could start to think about doing that by using the money that we were making, in some ways, putting money aside and using that money to, start to invest money in different things to gradually start to help us sort of win back some of our lives in different ways.
So what did you do over the last 6 years to get you where you are now, where you're no longer doing the accountancy job, and what was your primary focus? What's your primary focus been over the last 5 or 6
So
years?
huge
Getting rid
focus.
of debt, building investment assets,
Yeah,
what?
exactly that. So getting rid of that. So this house, we paid off this home in 2019. So that's been a huge thing for us
Well done. Good.
because we saw that as a way of reducing the huge expense that we have each month, such that
Yeah.
I can afford to do something else. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Career maximization. So really like trying to earn as much as I could through my career, whilst also putting a lot of our money away invested through the stock market. So there was always that balance between, yes, we have ongoing expenses. So there was also lifestyle kind of simplification. So we kept our lifestyle pretty flat, driving a different car now, much more efficient, living in our home, keeping things
being intentional. Being intentional.
Whilst our income was going up, we were using the power of the stock market, power of overpayments on our home, and exploring side things, whether it's a joint project, somebody else running a bit of side business, or whether it's me starting my own thing, or whether it's Mary running her party business. There was always something happening that meant that we were looking at alternative ways of boosting that income. Because one of the key things I learned from my mum specifically was she always said, like, even when I wanted to go into accountancy, she said, well, why don't you start a business and just hire an accountant? And that's because her life has always been, entrepreneurial. She's always tried to figure out how to do things slightly differently. One thing she always said to me was, don't ever rely on just that job that you've got. You might think, yeah, you're a professional now, but that job, one day, it's definitely guaranteed that you will leave that job. It's either you leave or they will push you. It will definitely happen. And so she'd always said, well, why don't you figure out something else you can do to help you make some extra income? What she was really saying was, why don't you use your creative ability to solve problems? And by doing that, you gain more confidence in your abilities, and you have more ability to make your own income.
So what was the pivotal point that made you decide to give up the job and do what you do now? And obviously you've got some investments, you've paid off the mortgage, you've got yourself in a good position. What was the catalyst, the final, yes, I'm going to do this?
Humongous catalyst. We knew something was going to happen this year. The biggest catalyst was what we've all been facing, this pandemic. Because I got to a stage where I was working crazy hours ordinarily, because like when you're not seeing colleagues and you're working remotely and you're still having to meet all the deadlines and do all the brain work that you have to do, build your financial models, and do all the things you have to do, you still have to put those hours in. But on top of that, like I had my kids running around everywhere because I now had to do homeschooling. And on top of that, I've been running the Humble Penny since 2017 in December. That was starting to gather momentum, and I was also running that with Mary on the side. So it just felt like there were too many things going on. And I'd always known that at some point I wanted to take the leap. But then the problem is when you are earning a really good income, in my case, a good 6-figure income, it's hard to just say, hey, I'm just going to like,
I don't want it. Yeah. Of course it is.
Like put that money up and just say, hey, like keep it. But I got to that point where it was either I stopped doing anything with Humble Penny, and then focused fully on my job and family life, or I said, you know what? I kind of want to back myself and see what happens, because like we've been good stewards of money all these years. How about we just give it a go? What's the worst that can happen? Because after all, like our living costs are very low, and we have income coming in anyway from different sources, as well as from this thing which started life as just as a blog. Why don't I just give this thing a go and see what happens? And so April was that pivotal moment where I had to go and have that conversation, and that conversation went well because I was able to get a bit of a an income from a bit of a payout from doing that, having that chat at that point, a bit of a negotiation, and then began what was in effect my first, call it, full-time leap into doing my own thing full-time. Because over the years I've been doing things on the side part-time, parallel to doing a normal job. But for the first time, I now have to wear a different hat, which is like, okay, if this thing's gonna, run and be sustainable, how is it gonna be that? What are the ideas? You have to now start to think as a visionary. How are you going to do that? And how do you start to have some structure, some processes, and systems, and a bit of a team to help and stuff like that? And so yeah, and then there was obviously the transition from the corporate life, which no one tells you about, because that transition is not easy. Because in the normal world, you're used to, you have a boss and you have, a salary and you have a balance sheet that, you can go and spend money from, and, you have all those
expenses,
things. Expenses, you've got colleagues, and you've got all these things. But like suddenly, on one day, it's like, there's a line
it's
that
the Ken and Mary show then, right?
Yeah, it's just suddenly got it. And you're like, well, hang on, okay.
So Ken, obviously, just thinking of the time now, but before we sort of close, what sort of pearls of wisdom or kind of principles would you want to share with listeners in terms of your money journey? What you've learnt about money that has been most relevant for you? Sort of top 2 or 3 tips.
So the first one will be not to let life happen to you, but for you to choose the life that you actually want to happen. It's complete. The version of life you will arrive at in years from now is the version that you actually choose.
Yeah.
If you understand yourself enough to become empowered through working on your mindset to choose that life that you really want and to go for it. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that the internet is actually hugely powerful. And there are many things that are wrong, and many things that are weird about it. But in the world we live in today, an individual, through their experience, through their knowledge, could actually, if they work really smartly and use the power of, being able to use virtual assistants and so on, could actually create their own business that actually helps them on that journey towards potentially creating a life that they want. My point being that one path as a career isn't really necessarily valid any longer. We're all going to have portfolio careers, in my view, in that, in your 30s, you might be one person doing one thing. In your 40s or late 30s, you might find yourself doing multiple things. Like I'm doing various things right now that I never envisaged that I might be doing at all. And then the final
adaptable. Yeah.
The final thing will be, where possible, really aim to, if you've got a partner, to collaborate and really be on the same page. Because I've found that being completely on the same page with my wife has been like life-changing, because we're not fighting, we're not arguing about stuff, but we're like, there's almost a family vision, and that family vision is what's then being brought into reality every day. You feel like you have a purpose for which you're working towards, and it begins at home. Really, if you can do that with your partner, it will be completely life-changing.
Those 3 pieces of wisdom, Ken, are wise beyond your age. You still look to me like you're 25. So amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And as I say, we'll make sure the website is thehumblepenny.com, isn't it? And we'll make sure that there's links in the show notes. Check out Ken's YouTube channel. I know he's got various videos there, so definitely worth checking out. Thank you very much for your time. I'm really going to look forward to watching the next stage of your life with great interest. Thanks for listening. If you want more money insights, do visit my website at jason-butler.com or connect with me on Twitter or Instagram at JB the Wealthman. See you next time.